So I'm just saying to the panelists, welcome. It's an honor to have you, and to everyone who's joining us on the webinar. And we know you are joining us from all over the world. We're very delighted to welcome you all here. I'm Hitesh Hathi. I'm the Executive Director of the Mittal Institute. And I won't take up too much of your time because we have some very interesting people who are following me. But I just wanted to say briefly about the Mittal Institute. The Mittal Institute is an interdisciplinary research institute that's based here in Cambridge, Massachusetts at Harvard University. But we also work all over South Asia. And if you were to ask me what it's about, it's really an institute dedicated to bringing knowledge to South Asia and from South Asia to the rest of the world to do intensive research that connects to critical issues that face South Asia and the rest of the world. Our modus operandi is to really go beyond all borders. Within the university, we work with every part of the university and every discipline. And in South Asia, we work across regions and borders on critical issues, whether it's healthcare or ancient and medieval manuscripts or preservation of art or science and teaching. We work all across the region. Please join us for all of our events. Sign on to our newsletter to see the range of activities we're doing. I just want to turn over today's proceedings. So we have two very distinguished guests. I will let our moderator, herself a distinguished person, introduce them. I just want to say briefly, one of the delights of being part of an institution like this is South Asia is the most varied, extraordinarily varied region in the world. And since we really take interest in everything, today we're going to hear a very unique and personal family history, which is one particular angle on a very complex issue, which sits at the center of South Asian geopolitics today still. So I'm looking forward to that. Let me introduce to you our moderator, who is an old friend, acquaintance, and a colleague also from my days in public radio. She has a very long bio, and I will only give you a short version. Natasha, you've done too much in life. Natasha Warikoo is the Lenore Stern Professor in the Humanities and Social Sciences in the Department of Sociology at Tufts University. She's been a Guggenheim Fellow. She's also been a high school teacher, and you will see a lot of her work comes from her firsthand knowledge of what it's like to work in schools at that level. She's an expert on racial and ethnic inequality in education. She released two books just in 2022. She was previously the Associate Professor of Education at Harvard University when we first met. And she taught in the New York City public schools. She's worked at the US Department of Education. Her PhD in sociology is from Harvard University. I could go on and list all of her books, which are many and various, but I will just turn over to you, Natasha. Thank you for joining us and doing this. And I will go off camera since I want the focus to be on you and the panelists, but I'm here.
Oh, well, thank you, Hitesh, for that nice and unnecessary introduction. And thank you to all of you for being here. I'm really looking forward to this next hour where we're going to talk about this book that hopefully you will all have a copy of yourself. Love, Exile, Redemption, the Saga of Kashmir's last Pandit Prime Minister and his English wife by Siddharth Kak and Lila Kak Bhan. I'm not a historian, nor am I a writer of memoirs, but I do feel very connected to this book. I once, in kind of a lifetime ago, before I became a sociologist, I once spent 2 weeks at Leela's school. She started a school in India, progressive education, and I went there and she welcomed me to her home. I lived with her for 2 weeks. And I volunteered at her school, and we had never met prior to my arriving at that, in Indore to be at her school. And I heard so many stories at that time about her parents and, this relationship they had and this history that they had lived through and been a part of. And, that and my own family history in Kashmir, very, very much tied to the lives of these wonderful people, really made me very interested in this story. So I'm excited for this discussion. And before I turn it over to our speakers, I'll just tell you a little bit about our two authors today who you'll hear from. I believe first, Leela is going to speak. Lila Kak Bhan has spent half a century of her career in teaching. She started working after completing her TTC and BA in 1963. She worked in India for 2 decades. She was headmistress of the Progressive Education School in Indore that I mentioned. This school was known for its student-centered, holistic approach to learning. She also taught in the US for 30 years and retired from the Fessenden School in West Newton in 2020. And she now lives in the US, in Massachusetts, with her children and their families. And our second author and speaker is Siddharth Kak, who many of you will know as a well-known television personality, commentator, and foodie and author. One of the pioneers of Indian television. He's knowledge partner of Vitasta, the Festival of Kashmir, hosted by the Ministry of Culture, and he's a member of the governing board of the Suraj Kund Mela Authority. His TV series Surabai became a cult show of Indian culture and identity on primetime television in the 1990s. His television company, Cinema Vision, has won several major television awards and 3 national awards. It's produced more than 100 documentaries and several long-running television series for leading television channels in India. So we have 2 distinguished authors writing about the story about their father and grandfather, Ram Chandra Kak, and his wife, Margaret Kak. So with that, I will turn it over to Leela. So this is the format today, is that our authors are going to speak for about 15 minutes or so, introduce the book, tell you a little bit about it. And then I will moderate a discussion between myself and the authors. And then we're going to open it up in the last, say, 20 minutes or so. So you'll be able to, as you can see at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A section. So if you have questions that you'd like me to pose to the authors, you can put them right in the Q&A. You can actually do that at any moment, but I won't start the Q&A until after we've had our moderated discussion at about 10:40. So that is, and we'll finish up right at the 11 o'clock Eastern. I know everybody's in different time zones, so depending on where you are, but in about an hour, a little less than an hour. Okay, I think that's it. I'm going to turn it over now to Leela.
Thank you, Natasha, for your kind words. I've never been called distinguished before, so I hope I rise to the occasion. And thank you for all your kind words about Indore. It was very nice that you came. That school was started actually by my nephew, Anil Kak, and I was the first headmistress. And this time it's Siddharth Kak that has inspired me to write this book with him, so I seem to be looked after by my family. This book has been waiting, as it were, for several years to be written. And had it not been for the lockdown, we might never have got to writing it. In the absence of WhatsApp and the myriad other ways to communicate, my mother used to religiously write a letter every week to her parents in England. And they weren't little short letters, they were 6-page tomes with every single detail. And if any of you have already read some of the book, you'll see that, because I've mostly quoted from her for her chapters, you'll see how beautifully she writes, even though I shouldn't say it myself. And they were saved by my grandparents. So when Mummy and I escaped to England in 1947, my aunt, my great aunt, I should say, brought them out and said to Mummy, here are some letters that have been saved for you. And I think they'll make a lovely book of a bygone era. So Mummy took the bundle, and she was really rather interested herself, because I'm sure if any of you keep diaries, you'll know how interesting it is to go back to them, because you forget things. And you suddenly said, oh yes, I do remember that. So it was only after many years that Mummy got a chance to look at all these epistles. And that was in our exile in the different places. Because in 1990, she had to leave once again in a rapid haste because of terrorism in Kashmir. And she remembered, luckily, to put her 2 bundles of letters in one of her 2 suitcases. And they traveled with her. They were thenceforth entrusted to me. And Mummy just made me make her one little promise. She said, you must write it, or Renuka, because you know all the nuances of my feelings and my home. Renuka is my daughter. And that's what happened. It was a daunting task to start writing, and I didn't know where to begin, and I kept procrastinating. And one day I got a phone call from Siddharth, and he had found my father's notes that he had been reading and handling in the 60s and 70s, and they'd been saved from many ravages of monsoons and travel. And he said, would I be ready to join with Mummy's letters, and should we write a combined book? Just a personal recounting of my parents' and his grandparents' lives. And it's a very, very personal angle. It's just how we perceive them. We're not here to write a political treatise. We're just giving our story with our understanding of these two amazing people. We both took the plunge, he in Bombay and I in Boston, and moved together on the book, extensively quoting from, as I said to you, my parents. It's intended to be a simple narration of the lives of two people that we consider remarkable and how they navigated obstacles and enjoyed their lives together, sharing their enjoyment with their grandchildren. It's not a political dissertation at all. They lived a life to its fullest, which I hope is evident to you as the various stories of their adventures. There's one little quote that I have from the book that really impressed me, and I'd like to read it out. It shows how my mother immediately accepted this very alien culture it was to her. By the end of her life, it was her culture. And I'll go to the end of the life first and tell you what she said that made me make this remark, and then go to the beginning. She said to me at the end one day when she was staying with me in Boston, and she used to go home to India, to Kashmir for 6 months for a visit. She said, I breathe such a sigh of relief when I reach the Indira International Airport, because I see all the women with their little bundles and children running around and things, and that's home to me. I find England very sterile now. And so I realized that she really got it into herself, the smells and the feelings and the screams and the toddlers all mashed together. But when she first came, on the first trip to Kashmir, they stopped at Verna, which is a shrine on the way into Srinagar. And she entered a temple, and having come from a Christian background, our idols and our garlands and our incense were not very familiar to her. So she said, in the Vernak shrine, we were invited to see more images. Removing my shoes, I entered the house of Baal for the first time in my life. It didn't seem permeated by evil or brooding with horror or any of the other things that I had been told. There the images were, some with flowers stuck upon them or wreathed with a garland and sticky with ghee with which they had been libated. I miss the smell of our village churches, dust and lamp oil and old wood, but there was a smell which no doubt to an Indian is just as full of associations. And this clinched her whole attitude to life ever after. She accepted everything and saw that what was something for her, it might have a different something, but it meant the same amount of depth and emotion for someone else. And that's the line that stuck to me as a grown-up. I hadn't really read it before, but as I wrote the book, I came there, and I've been quoting it and reading it several times. Please excuse my sore throat. Siddharth will now continue with his own ideas and also why we gave the title that we did. Siddharth.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Our affectionate, or my affectionate name for her is Billy. Now, I don't know how that came about. But
may I tell everyone, because there's a curiosity.
Please tell.
Billy is cat in Hindi and Kashmiri, and I loved milk. So Mummy thought that was rather a nice name and easy. And so I was Billy or Billa, and have been that for my 80 years of life.
Wow. So this was, thank you for this conversation. I've actually I got this information for the first time. I think I heard it, but I'd forgotten about it. But thank you, Billy, for telling me, because I was always wondering, Billy, but Billy is an American name. But this is Billa. It is coming from Billy. यानी कि भारतीय बिल्ली जो है Acha, badhiya. Anyway, though that's another conversation. But thank you, Billy, for the introduction that you have given up to now. And how did we give this book this title? It has gone through many iterations, and we've had many discussions, and I have had much advice about what the title should be like. And somebody said, you must have Kashmir in it. Somebody said, you must have, the Prime Minister in it. You must have a title which is historically, or for people who are in academics, they must respond to it and want to read such a book. And Billy and I were not convinced by these various arguments, because these were also arguments from our very supportive publishers, Rupa. Rupa did an excellent job, and we learned a lot in the process of how a book is brought out. But in fact, it was one of the chief editor of Rupa, one morning when I'm just sitting with him, and he tells his colleagues, Bhaiya, this book, it's somewhere it should have love in it. And it hit me with a force. This is a book about love. And it's outstanding love. And as Billy and I have discussed in the past, you see, our parents, our grandparents, we don't think that they are, human beings who are capable of, passion and kissing in public and so forth, because they are we see them in a very staid light, and they're supposed to look after us, and they're supposed to, take care of us, but they're not supposed to be having wild romances, while they're bringing us up. So love was the first reason why it reflected our approach to the book, that we wanted to focus on the personal. And to that, I would say that yes, neither Billy, though she was just about on the cusp of it, and certainly not me, were even born when independence came around, and the division took place in 47. So we were not eyewitnesses to that particular moment. But the beauty of it was, and complication of it was, that Bhaiji, my grandfather, was the witness, as indeed Bendit, Billy's mother, was witness to her entire collaboration, if you feel like, her osmosis process of integration into India. And the way she expressed it, because reading her, the way she wrote, I thought she had a career as a very important author and a commentator on India. But she was a very modest and retiring lady, and didn't put herself forward in the limelight at all. Anyway, the story of the book, the memoirs, or you would call the notes of my grandfather, was that when I was young, I had interviewed him at length. There were no copies of there were no tape recorders, at least not with me, but I was laboriously writing everything down in longhand. So all that was transcribed, and it was put on paper, and I had his memoirs as well, his notes as well. But I was busy leading a life, and that life was as a television filmmaker, producer in Mumbai. And so many years it remained, not in the front of my mind, though I did want to write this book, because I was deeply influenced by both my grandfather and grandmother. And then when the floods in Mumbai came, my office was submerged up to the first floor. So all my papers and documents were lost. And I thought, well, everything is gone. But one day, years later, looking through the attic, I found all the notes intact out there. And that sparked the thought, just before COVID came around, that what a treasure house that we have. And so we decided to start writing the book. The love part of it came a great deal from what Pandit, Billy's mother, wrote, because she wrote with greater frankness. Bhaiji was a little stern and wouldn't speak, he was a bit gruff that way. He wouldn't reveal his feelings that much. And therefore, we discovered from his notes and from Pandit's notes the elements of exile, which we found the exile when they had to leave the country, the state of their love, and to go to first to England and to Mumbai also became Bombay at that time, and then back to Kashmir via Kasauli. So that became a stirring story of an exile, and return to Kashmir became the redemption. And everybody else wanted the rest of the tagline is there, the story of the last Pandit Prime Minister of Kashmir and his English wife. So if you don't know what it's love, exile, and redemption is all about, it's actually a very stirring tale, emotional tale of two people facing the odds together, two people from different parts of the world, and their story, and how we were caught up into it as their children. That's my understanding of how we came to the title of that book. Natasha. Or Billy.
Thank you. That was really great to hear. A nice integration of these two characters. One of the things I really appreciate about this book is how, there are sort of two parallel storylines of, two characters in the book. And they're these kind of really extraordinary lives. For people who haven't read the book, this book is about, in part because it's about the letters of Margaret's letters, and then Ram Chandra, his both his diaries, and Siddharth, I know you interviewed him many times over the course of your time with him as well. And so it's both the story of their union and how they met and how they kind of how she moved to India at this time, going by boat. There was no airplanes at that time, to a completely different place. And how they, and then, this extraordinary history that they were living through. So I thought, I would love for the two of you just to talk about just, in terms of your own lived experience, like how much did you as children, and I guess the children of this couple or grandchild of this couple, how much did you sort of see or understand the significance of this, both this union and what was happening in terms of the history of South Asia and these particular moments? Like, was that obvious? Did they talk about this? Did you feel that sense of history unfolding in front of you? I would love to hear you talk about what that was like on a personal level.
I would, Siddharth, do you want to go first?
No, Billy, you should start.
I think that's a really good question, because in one way I didn't realize, but my father was always peppering me with Sanskrit quotations and philosophy of life. And we would go for walks when we were on holiday, and I would go with him every day at 11 o'clock for a long walk, and sometimes I use the word subjected to a lot of philosophy and thought. And occasionally I'd say to Mommy, I've heard some of the stories so many times. She said, no, darling, go, you will find them very useful one day. Maybe she wanted me out of the way as well for a little while she got on with the housework. But I did notice and feel a sense of great security, which when I think back today, I don't think I've ever seen, and please forgive me if I'm overstepping anyone, such a happy and harmonious couple in my life. They never seemed to argue. They always seemed to respect each other and say what they had to. No loud voices or anything did I ever come across. Now, I may be rather exaggerating that. I'm quite ready to say that was my fantasy, but they were just amazing. And the other thing was my mother was very empathetic. And right from my childhood, I was sort of shown the lessons of don't take revenge, always give the other person a chance. She grew up like that, and we grew up like that. So it always surprises me when people feel unpleasantly, and I said, oh, haven't you seen that side of them, or that this was her characteristic. So that is something that filtered down to me. And the other thing is she came without the feeling of classes, I think. So in my time growing up, there's very much the Harijan class, the untouchables, as they were, I'm ashamed to use that word, were called. And we had one called Etwari. He must have been born on a Sunday, Etwar. So Etwari would in no other house have been allowed in. But he came in, Mummy would make him tea, hand it over to him. He did our dusting. And he was just like any other person in the house. And he wouldn't have been like that. But I took it for granted till I studied history and people pointed it out to me. So I will say that I was very naturally brought up by them, but the pondering has come when I grew up a little bit. But I was very blessed in them. I hope they know.
Well, I found I'm 5 years, actually, strangely, we have 5 years only separate us, younger than Leela, Billy. But I was growing up into a world which I did not find necessarily agreeing with the great talent that I assumed I had. And, I wanted everybody to recognize that particular talent. Certainly, with Bhaiji and Bandit, my relationship, as you will notice in this conversation and the way the book has been actually sort of has evolved, is that Billy has the letters and her association, deep association with her mother. And I had the memoirs and notes and a deep association with my grandfather. And hence those writings and the notes and so forth and so on. And I would turn to him when I was in trouble. And I remember when I was a young man in Delhi and I had wanted to get an article of mine published in the newspaper. And the gentleman didn't come on the line and he would not publish the piece that I had sent him after having assured me that it was very good and he would get it published. And then I wrote a letter of frustration to Bhaiji to say, look, this is life is at an end for me. I cannot get my publication done. So I'm finished for life. And he sent me the letter, which is reproduced in the book. It was a longish letter where he counseled me. And he quoted from the Sanskrit, he quoted from the Persian, and he also spoke with great gentleness and love to say to me that nothing that I am going through is unusual and that he himself has faced it. Even as a very senior officer, perhaps the Prime Minister of the state in Delhi, he was asked to wait outside some secretary bureaucrat's door for some activity, for action that he had wanted to get done. So he had to bear that. And then in the end, he said to me that if anything happens for the good, that is good. And if something happens which is not good, that is also good. Everything that you experience is for the good. And I have preserved that letter because it made me realize how petty and how, inconsequential my so-called, frustration was, because life throws you big challenges and you have to face them irrespective of what they are. And therefore, one of the challenges, and if I change gear slightly as I narrate this for Billy and myself, and I hope that you, when you read it and you will, either you will see it or feel it, or you won't, and you would give us a feedback, is that this book, we're very happy and it was very helpful for us that 4 people together wrote this book. And the 4 people are my grandfather, his words, my grandmother, her actual letters, Billy writing from one side, I'm writing from another side. And sometimes we're writing about the same thing. So are we repeating ourselves? Is the line flowing? Can you recognize who's speaking, who's not speaking now? Somebody else has come into the picture. I think I must compliment Rupa for having done a very good job of actually organically integrating these different voices. And you will find these four voices fascinating in their own right. Because while we are not politically, either capable, we are neither historians, nor have we had deep interest in politics ourselves. But my grandfather's memoirs speak for themselves. He has witnessed the era. Now, you may agree with him, you may not agree with him, but they are being reproduced for you to hear, to see, and to judge, if you like, for yourself. And I do know that most of the people always want to ask me, so then what happened when, in 45, in 46, and what happened with Pandit Nehru, etc. It's all there in the book. But we were not aware. We were not present. My grandfather was. And it's worth reading because he was a man of great, shall we say, restraint. And his ability, his language was amazing. The way he would write. Very simple, straightforward, and to the point. That was his personality. And my grandmother wrote with affection and love, and it was very personal, very emotional. So these were these two particular characters who participated in the writing of this book, and it made it complete because with Billy, we got one point of view. With me, we got another point of view. And most important, with my grandparents, I got their point of view of a time when we were not there to witness ourselves about Kashmir. Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to remind the audience, in a few minutes, we're going to turn to Q&A from all of you. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and I'll collate them and relay them to our panelists. So it comes through so clearly, both in the book and just hearing the two of you speak today, how much love and admiration you have for these two wonderful, extraordinary people. And live these sort of, really unique lives. I'd love to hear about, you lived through this as family members. And then in the last few years, you kind of really dug into these archives that you had. I'd love to hear you talk just a little bit about, was there anything that surprised you as you dug into the letters and the notes? Or, anything that you saw differently or gain a new perspective of because you're looking at it retrospectively? Anything that changed as you kind of went into these documents?
Well, I knew that my grandfather had not spoken to my grandmother for about 3 or 4 years at all when she came, and nor to my father. But then I was really amazed how they handled it. There was no resentment. You see, many people would stop talking and not go and say, well, who cares? Be unpleasant. There was none of that. He would go every single day from his office to the home that he built and sit by his father's on the floor, sit down, and my grandfather would turn his face. But my father didn't resent it. He just sat there, I don't know for how long, maybe 20 minutes, and he would come home. And my mother didn't resent it and say things to him, you've got to choose me or him or anything. They just patiently bore it. And by the end, my grandfather really took to my mother and said a very thing that mommy's repeated 100 times. She tried to learn Kashmiri and she managed, but it was broken. I mean, in 3 years, you don't learn a whole language. But they spoke about Aristotle and Plato and things, and Aflatun, and he would say in Kashmiri. I think Aflatun is Plato. I'm not quite sure. Yes. But anyway, they talked like that. And then he said, I see there's no difference between you and me, except you all used to eat beef and we don't. And Mummy thought there could be no better analogy, that the only difference was in the eating habit. And she said that to me so many times. And I think it's remarkable when in the simplicity, couldn't find any difference, just this very cursory, superficial thing. And so I realized tolerance, and it really amazed me. There are many stories of how tolerant they were. And I think that's the one trait they wanted to pass down to the descendants, that we should be, caring and helpful and tolerant. Siddharth, do you remember anything?
I think, Natasha, you are wanting to know about the documents and what they revealed, or in conversation later. Is that what you were asking?
Just curious about, I can imagine, I was sort of trying to put myself in your shoes, having known your family, obviously, all your life, and then going back and I know for some of this, you had sort of taken these notes, or even, reading the letters, hearing about the letters of your grandmother, anything that you shifted in terms of the way that you think about anything about their lives, about history, or if not, I mean, if there maybe it was a little different because you were not reading things that you had written most of these things. So I was just curious.
No, it's a very good point, and I would like to answer that. First of all, to say that I was a callow youth when I recorded what my grandfather was talking to me about. I didn't realize actually the wisdom or the knowledge about the time that he was communicating to me. I was automatically writing it down, only reflecting upon it 30 years or more later. I realized what it was all about. For instance, I discovered that it was not an easy thing to be in state government in his time. It was a great merry-go-round, and and everybody was involved in chasing their tail or biting off somebody else's tail. And because at the end there was no real power. The power was with the Maharaja of Kashmir, and what he decided. What Bhaiji had to do was to make it as palatable as possible and to implement what the Maharaja Sahib was wanting to get done. But the government, it appeared to me from when I read his piece afterwards, many years later, it seemed to be a great and elaborate dance, if you like, of democracy, where at the end of the day, everybody came back to where they started from. That was one. The other thing is that it is surprising the extent of orthodoxy that existed in Kashmir in that time. How important it was to have, holy men, and how much reverence was given to them. And even for Bhaiji, as a young man growing up, he would, people, if he was coming out and there was an incident where there was a woman who was a Harijan, and he had spoken to her, encouraged her. She was carrying a young girl, carrying a load. And so he touched her and she went away. But then the neighbors who were looking at him said, "Now you go and have a bath." And he refused to have a bath. But he fought with all that, the orthodoxy, and brought reason to it as well. It was an uphill task for him as well to be able to manage that. And it struck me that it was a period of time, quite honestly, that you didn't feel the absence of a phone. If something happened in one part of the city, within seconds, through word of mouth, it would come to another part of the city, because that was all the entertainment there was. And even there was no cinema, there was no radio, but it was gossip, it was rumor, and it was also a lot of home entertainment, which used to take place in those days, where the children and the family members used to be participating in festivals and performances. These were all great events. which involved the entire joint families together, and everybody loved them. So that was the era and that particular time, which I thought I understood later when I read his what he wrote. It gave me a great insight into that time, which when I first began it, I must confess, I did not pay much attention, and I am the loser for it, because I only focused on my grandfather. I should have interviewed my grandmother as well. My bad. Lucky that Billy had all those letters which revealed her point of view so magnificently. But I should have interviewed her, and that is something that I feel bad about, because I would have learned a great deal asking her the questions that maybe would not have been answered in her letters, but would have been in my questions to her. I would have learned a lot.
May I add one thing to Siddharth's story, a little bit more? The story of the lay girl, you got it half, but not the whole story. Because I'm that much older than you, and probably it sank in better. Yeah. So this girl had a basket of cow dung on her head, right, and she couldn't put it, she put it down, but it was difficult for her to lift it and put it on her head. So Bhaiji went and helped her. He was with some other college students. This is in Jammu by the Tabi River. And he helped her put it on her head, and they all said to Ramju, go and have a bath now, make yourself pure. He said, if her touch can make me impure, why can't my touch make her pure? I'm not going to have anything. He made sure that he helped her and guided her. Now, in today's world, we've got so many other considerations to think of, and many people won't understand, and good that they don't understand all these problems. But in the days that he was living, we've always got to put things in context. So in the days that he was living, there was a lot of caste. And it's really wonderful that he gave us the example then, way back in the 40s, not to heed it at all. So we were privileged. That's the little romantic story.
And that's the beauty of having aunts who can effectively complete your sentence with the story. Thank you, Billy. Thank you, Billy.
So I thought I should just, in case there are people listening who are less familiar with Ram Chandra Kak and Margaret Kak, he was, of course, the first, he was the Prime Minister of Kashmir from 1945 to 1947, at the time of the partition of India. So, navigating these tricky waters all over the subcontinent, but of course, even more so in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So part of this kind of extraordinary history when the subcontinent was being divided among these two new nations. So I thought I would turn to the Q&A. There's a bunch of questions. I'm trying to kind of do my best to put them all together. There are a few questions about history, and I know this is not a historical account or a dig into what actually happened or what, but there's some questions, and perhaps, if you want to answer any of them related to, again, what you learned from your family, questions about, Ram Chandra Kak's views or decisions about, joining Pakistan, India. There was another question about how he ended up the prime minister, as coming, he was actually the head of I didn't know this, the head of the archaeology department, which is also must be such an interesting role that he played. And so how did he end up going into politics? There was another question about the political history. That's a different one. Oh, here it is. Sorry, I'm in a different place. It was about, the third, or an independent state, was that sort of one of the things that he thought about. So any of those that, you feel you have an understanding of that's different from, based on what you read or what's in the book.
Well, he has, in great detail, there are, I think, 5 or 6 chapters based very largely interpretation of his memoirs or his writings, which deal with many aspects of these. They would include the questions of what were the political situation at that time, what he himself as a prime minister undertook to change things in Kashmir. He didn't have enough time to complete all those, but fundamentally, I would say that he was the kind of person who, as far as the independent state was concerned, or accession to one part of the country or the other was concerned, one must understand that he is a Sanskrit scholar. He has deep love and affection for Kashmir. And so, therefore, the sort of sense that he would be interested in joining Pakistan is fairly absurd. But why he wanted to remain independent, as he writes, I'm not a political commentator, but he writes, it makes sense, that he said that for the Maharaja he was heading a predominantly Muslim state as a Hindu Raja. Now, whichever way you go, you are going to have, inflamed tempers and feelings, because if it's Muslim way, then you will have one kind of reaction, and if it's the Hindu way, you will have another kind of reaction. Therefore, it is best, he felt, from a practical statesman-like point of view, that Kashmir should be independent and, importantly, friendly with both sides, so that they can take advantage of economic and other cultural ties. And that was the way he looked at it. And that's what he even mentioned to Mountbatten. When Lord Mountbatten said to him, but you have to take a decision based on your population. So he made a very interesting reply to that. The population is a Muslim population. So Lord Mountbatten is suggesting that he should, accede to Pakistan. So he said, I represent India, and the soul of India is here in Kashmir. If you look at the Sharda Devi, goddess Saraswati, the goddess of learning, is in Kashmir, and the whole of India looks to Kashmir for that sustenance, for that, with reverence. I cannot betray that. It is my upbringing too, and that he got even from the archaeology. If you look at the excavations he has done, and if he is at the Martan temple and with the sun god and so forth, and he has seen the evidence of history, the evidence of the Buddhist legacy in India, which is where there is even a lost Buddhist city, hopefully, somewhere near where we used to stay. And we used to see those Buddhist potsherds along the way, along the pathway. You will read it in the book. The fascinating thing. And what is that lost Buddhist city, and where is that lost Buddhist city? He was aware of it. He knew it. And therefore, he was very clear that Kashmir would need to be independent, friendly to both sides, when the time came. As a seasoned, wise statesman, Kashmir would accede to India.
So, I mean, this is, it's amazing how, your grandfather and your grandmother were, exceedingly tolerant. And, if we even think about today and some of the, intolerance we see really around the world, these, in some ways, so much has changed and so much remains the same. It's extraordinary. They were sort of, ahead of their time in terms of acceptance. I thought I would ask a few questions now about Margaret. There are two questions that came up in the Q&A. One was about the tradition of letter writing, and has that continued in your family, or how do you have a similar kind of thing that's moved on? Now we're in a very different era, and just how do you sort of see those stories being told in the contemporary period, I guess more broadly, maybe TikTok, I don't know. And then a second question about her name, where that came from, Bendit, because you talk about how her nickname, or everybody, I think everybody called her Bendit, and where that came from. So maybe we'll go to her story now.
Well, about the letters, I went to a boarding school for a while, and there we had to write weekly letters. It was still in the 50s. So I was sort of brought up in the letter writing tradition, and my mother, right till 1990, I used to write to her when she was in India before she came to live with me permanently, which was in the 80s. And so she, of course, didn't particularly want, at that time they were faxing. We didn't even have email in the 80s, did we? I'm not sure. I don't think we had email in the 80s.
Not in the 80s, 90s.
So,
I remember when our TV show
phone
started.
calls were terribly tedious. You had to get hold of an operator, and then they put it down. Then they would suddenly hear this scream from one side to the other, Mrs. Kak, Mrs. Kak, and then Leela, Leela, and then they'd connect you, and then you'd suddenly taper off, and So letters seemed the sound way of doing it, and then they were saved. And there are many of my cousins, in fact, I've even quoted from one of them in England. She was much admired for her letter writing skills. So I think that became a big skill in our family. It's now petered out. I think I'm one of the last few, another with a few cousins, particularly the English ones who send Christmas cards rather than, through the internet. So I think it's lasted till, you could say, till about the mid 21st century, or not mid, but the 2012, 2013, and then we moved.
But she's
So
asking about why Bendit? Why the name Bendit? Why was she called Bendit?
Yeah. Sure, but I know Ben is Behan's sister. Mummy told me it meant lady sister or respected sister. And since Bhaiji was a partner for him. And Bhaiji is a sort of generic name we have not. My father-in-law was Bhaiji, so it was Bhaiji Kak and Bhaiji Bhan, the two grandparents. And she was the kind of partner to Bhaiji, then that lady sister, respected sister. Did you have another version, Siddharth?
No. My version is that in our country, in our family at any rate, the name sticks. So in Bendit is Bendit to everybody, because Bendit.
No, she was asking for meaning. It meant respected sister, lady sister.
Yeah. Bendit, the respected, probably elder sister. But I am saying that the kind of nicknames that we would have in our family would stick for life, and every member of the family had the right to use that same.
Even the helpers would call
even the helpers. So that is why, for instance, my mother was called Gigi. Gigi also, I think, is sort of sister, elder sister, respected sister.
Nichi was very common, little girl, Nichi.
Nichi is younger, but Gigi, then that her cousins and her nieces and her nephews were all calling her Gigi. As indeed today, her sister, my mother, no more now, her younger sister, over 90, Shanta Bhargav, she was known as Bibi. Bibi means wife. I call her Bibi.
I call her Bibi.
We call her Bibi, and absolutely natural. It's her name now. Her name is Bibi. She is universal wife, universal mother, universal sister, if you feel like. So that is the story of nicknames in India, in Kashmir.
My mother was the oldest in her family, and her mother used to call her Didi, which means older sister, because that's what all the siblings called her. And of course, she's not her mother's sister. We're going to wrap up in just a few minutes. I thought I'd just open it up to the two of you to say, what would you like readers of this book to kind of come away with in in a short 60 seconds, because we're going to run out of time, but what do you want people who read this book to take away from the stories that you've shared?
Mine is quite easy and simple. I want them to take away tolerance, because I think the world is so intolerant now and unkind. I think they can see how you can surmount all obstacles if you're kind, loving, and tolerant. And I think that's what I could call my parents. And I would love to end with that. Those are the three things we should all be: kind, tolerant, non-judgmental, and open-hearted. And they were.
I would say, I would like people to look at this book, to approach it as an epic story. This is a, if you like, we can exaggerate it. This is an historical romance, if you feel like, but it is real. It happened. I would like people to see this as a love story of the ages. That is how actually I have been inspired by it. And I'm so happy, delighted that I was part of this story and I saw it happening in front of my eyes. And it has inspired me, given me calm, given me peace, and given me a certain sense of understanding of life, the life of my grandparents. I hope it gives you too that same kind of message, or conveys to you organically the feeling that we had through this epic love story.
Well, I will say, having read this book, and I want to show everybody at home, if you haven't gotten a physical copy of the book, certainly the kind of epic love story, the story of tolerance, really, and just an extraordinary story. You know, the political history, the relationship. It really comes through in this story, and in the way that you've told it. So I want to encourage everyone at home, and hopefully someone can put in the chat again, because the chat's quite full, how people can get a copy of the book. There are so many questions here. We'll save them for you, Siddharth and Leela, so you can kind of look at them later. And lots of expressions of love and admiration for the two of you as well, that I know you'll want to see. But I really want to thank everyone for being with us. I'm going to turn it over to Hitesh just before we end, but let me just say thank you for inviting me to be an interlocutor in this wonderful discussion. And thank you for all of your comments and questions. I'm sorry that we didn't get to all of them. I'll turn it over to Hitesh now.
Natasha, thank you very much. Leela ji, Siddharth Bhai, thank you both very much. Really a fascinating look into a very private family life. And it just so happens that a family member who was there at a pretty crucial moment in modern South Asian history. There's a lot in the book. Of course, you couldn't get to all of it. I'm looking forward to finishing it. I'm 2/3 of the way through. I have to say that some of the anecdotes and the scene settings are really delightful. They bring us to a different world. And what I noticed here in your presentations also is the ways in which Farsi, that is to say Persian, Sanskrit, and English, all were a natural part of the world in which you grew up, which is also, I think, something that was true of Indian life, and we hope will continue to be so, because those are all part of our inheritance. You bring us to a different time, a difficult moment, which people can read in many different ways, but a time in which there was also a breadth and a liberality of worldview that we hope we can preserve. I want to thank you both very much for joining us. It's really an honor. And Natasha, thank you for so expertly guiding us through this. I'm very delighted, and it's really wonderful to have you. This is your first time hosting something for the Mittal Institute, and because no good deed goes unpunished, we will turn to you again. I hope you will allow that.
Thank you,
and everyone who's joined us on the webinar, thank you very much. Thank you for your questions. We will, as Natasha said, preserve them so that both of our panelists can read them and respond. Really delighted to have you all with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. All the best. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Harvard.
Thank you.
Thank you, audience. Namaskar.